Commuters are advised to use public transport when heading to work this morning here in Seoul. The capital region will be blanketed by up to 10 centimeters of heavy snow, pushing the government to activate its emergency response system. The UN is forecasting that global economic growth will fall significantly to 1.9% this year. That will be one of the slowest growth rates in recent decades, apart from at the height of the pandemic. The US and Germany have made their final call to send key battle tanks to Ukraine. While Western countries welcome the dual announcements, Russia warns that tanks will burn like the rest. Good morning. It's a rather mild morning temperature-wise after the freezing weather yesterday. But the central region here in South Korea is now under heavy snow. People commuting to work are advised to be extra careful as traffic congestion is expected throughout the day. For more, we have our Choi Min-jung on the line. Min-jung, how is it looking this morning?
Well, people in the capital region might have had some trouble going to work this morning as the Seoul metropolitan area has been covered with snow since the early hours of Thursday. A heavy snow warning has been issued for the western part of Seoul, as well as parts of Gyeonggi-do Province and Incheon. The Korea Meteorological Administration forecast as much as 10 centimeters of snow to fall in some parts of the capital region, with Seoul witnessing up to 7 centimeters. But the snowfall is expected to stop this afternoon. The KMA also warned that snow in low temperatures could freeze roads and cause danger during rush hour, so it has advised people to commute by using public transport if possible.
Right. We do hope everyone remains safe today because accidents are likely to occur in such brutal weather. Now, how is the government working to prevent accidents?
Right. The authorities have stepped up measures to prevent inconvenience or accidents. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety has issued a Level 1 response, the lowest of its 3 levels of action that can be taken during a natural disaster. It has also raised the alert level from interest to caution. Meanwhile, authorities in Seoul have dispatched some 9,000 people since last night to clear snow from the roads, and public transport has also been increased during the rush hour. Subways and city buses are operating at a more frequent rate for 30 minutes longer during the morning and evening. The government also said it will promptly inform citizens with information regarding the weather and road conditions. That's all I have at this hour. Back to you, Dami.
Thank you, Min-jung, for the update. Now, moving on, another grim economic forecast, this time from the UN, which says global growth will slow to 1.9% this year, while the South Korean economy is projected to grow by 2%. Our Lee Kyung-eun explains.
High inflation, rate hikes, and geopolitical conflicts. Senior economists from the UN forecast that these complex crises will slow global growth to 1.9% this year. That marks a sharp decline from 3% in 2022. They note it will be one of the lowest growth rates in recent decades, with the exception of during the 2008 financial crisis and at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic 2 years ago, that saw minus 3.3%. The growth rate is expected to rise moderately to 2.7% next year. The forecast is in line with a World Bank projection made earlier this month that revised down the global growth rate to 1.7%, a drop of more than 1 full percentage point from its previous forecast 6 months ago. Citing weakening domestic consumption and investment, one senior UN economist says several countries will see a mild recession. Such an outcome will be most notably seen in the developed countries, like the US and the EU, whose growth projections, according to the UN, are 0.4% and 0.2% respectively. The agency projects South Korea's economy to expand by 2%, Japan by 1.5%, and China by 4.8%. Despite lifting its strict zero COVID-19 policy, the projection is still far lower than the 6% range seen in China in the years before COVID-19. This is in part as a result of a virus resurgence following the easing of restrictions. On a brighter note, global inflation, which reached its highest figure of about 9% in decades in 2022, will slightly dip, but will remain at a concerning level of 6.5%. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
On to the Ukraine crisis, Washington says it will send a total of 31 U.S.-made Abrams tanks to Ukraine as Kyiv prepares for a fresh Russian offensive. Now, the announcement follows Germany's decision to send its battle tanks to Ukraine. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
With the West's continued support of Ukraine, U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday announced the sending of the M1A1 Abrams tank as Kyiv prepares for a fresh Russian offensive.
Armored capability, as General Austin will tell you, has been critical. And today I'm announcing that the United States will be sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine.
As part of their latest support for Ukraine, the U.S. agreed to send 31 Abrams tanks worth $400 million. However, President Biden noted that the delivery of the tanks to the field, as well as making sure the Ukrainian soldiers are capable of using the tanks, will take time. He later added that the tank support is about helping Ukraine defend and protect Ukrainian land and not an offensive threat to Russia. The announcement comes as Washington had been hesitant about supplying Kyiv with its high-tech tank, but the about-face decision comes quickly after Germany earlier this week agreed to send 14 of its German-made Leopard 2 tanks, while also allowing other countries to supply Ukraine with the tanks. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky thanked Biden via Twitter, saying that the transfer of the Abrams tanks is an important step on the path to victory. While a number of Western allies of Ukraine had hailed the recent decisions from the U.S. and Germany, Russia earlier in the week condemned the expected U.S. announcement, saying it will not prevent Russia from reaching its goals, adding that more weapons from NATO will bring more suffering to people in Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korean hacker organizations are trying a variety of new methods to steal virtual currency. According to Proofpoint, an American information technology security company, North Korean hackers are showing a startup mentality and testing new methods, such as sending emails with job offers or salary adjustments to hack cryptocurrency. The report also added that a North Korean hacker group called TA444 launched a large-scale phishing attack targeting the financial, education, government, and medical sectors in the U.S. and Canada in December using such methods. The hackers are also using social media networking service LinkedIn to reach potential targets. With many experts agreeing that COVID-19 will eventually become endemic, things are returning to normal after 3 years of antivirus measures. But we are still under a public health emergency, as declared by the World Health Organization in March 2020. Now, on Friday, the WHO will decide if the COVID-19 pandemic is still a global emergency. For more, we are joined by Professor William Schaffner. He's a professor of infectious disease at Vanderbilt School of Medicine. Welcome to the program.
Good to be with you. Good morning.
Good morning, and good evening to you. Now, a public health emergency of international concern is the strongest alert that the WHO can issue. Now, how likely is it that the international body will say COVID-19 is no longer one? What are some of the variables and factors that the WHO will look into before making its final call?
Yes, well, I expect there will be considerable debate on this point because although many countries have moved from pandemic to endemic, it's really quite clear, for example, that in China, we're currently seeing a pandemic because of the relaxation of previous restrictions. So clearly, the situation is not the same in every country around the world. And the fact that this virus is still spreading very, very widely in China, but also in other parts of the world, makes me hesitant. And so I wonder if it's a good idea to withdraw the concept of a public health emergency. Because usually what happens, then governments become less relaxed. They put more, they take resources away from public health, and the general public is less cautious about COVID.
Right, definitely different situations in different countries, especially China, can really make it a headache for the WHO can make its final call. Now, what actually happens then when the COVID-19 emergency declaration actually ends? What does it mean? I mean, will the decision make a difference in our daily lives?
Well, I think in some small ways, because different countries then will put less emphasis on COVID prevention and COVID treatment. And there could be outbreaks here and there, but many people then will feel much more relaxed and on a personal level will let their guard down. They may not be as apt to be vaccinated. They won't pay as much attention to social distancing. They'll take off their masks and they'll be much more relaxed. This may indeed provide further opportunities for this virus in its new highly contagious variants to spread.
Right, I agree with you, Professor. The word emergency itself sounds very daunting as well. Now, as of 2023, COVID-19, monkeypox, and polio have been categorized as public health emergencies of international concern. Now, why is it necessary to declare or keep viruses, like I mentioned, as public health emergencies?
The declaration of a public health emergency focuses the attention of not only the public health leadership on a problem, but the political leaders. And that obliges them to put more resources into fighting the infection at that time. If you withdraw the public health emergency declaration, then of course the opposite will happen. The political leadership will think the problem is finished, we don't have to put resources into this anymore, and there can be a resurgence of the disease in many countries.
Right. Even living in the endemic era, their role, politicians' role, still remains quite crucial. All right.
Yes.
Thank you for your time this morning and evening for you.
My pleasure.
Now, just when we thought the freezing cold weather was the last thing to worry about this winter, high heating bills have also become a burden for people here in South Korea. Our Lee Si-hoo reports.
As the cold wave takes over the Korean peninsula, many households are being hit with high and rising energy bills. Prices of gas used by households in South Korea this January rose over a whopping 38% compared to the same month last year. Once the government-run Korea Gas Corporation that imports liquefied natural gas, or LNG, sets the wholesale price, the retail prices for households are determined by each city and province. Last year alone, the wholesale price rose 4 times, rising over 42% in total. And according to data released by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, the import price of LNG rose over 40% in December of 2022 compared to the same month the year before. The rise comes as the global energy crisis is being driven by factors such as the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the price of electricity rose over 13 Korean won per kilowatt hour in the first quarter, which would add around 4,000 Korean won to the monthly bill of a 4-person household. The government is expected to raise their price of electricity further in the second quarter. Over at the National Assembly, politicians from both the ruling and opposition blocs actively voiced their opinions on the matter. The head of the Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung, on Wednesday suggested an extra budget bill to support rising energy bills. Lee also suggested more tax on energy companies making large profits, similar to what's called the windfall tax that's been charged in Europe.
I think we should consider employing the windfall tax that other countries have already adopted.
The ruling People Power Party said that the previous Moon administration is to blame for the price surge. Song Won-seok, the chief deputy floor leader of PPP, said that the rise is due to the deficit accumulated by the previous government. Song added that the previous administration's policy focused on phasing out nuclear power generation caused a rise in electricity production costs, messing up the earnings and expenses of Korea Electric Power Corporation. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Staying on the local front, the number of workers taking parental leave here in the country hit an all-time high last year. And among them, 3 out of 10 were fathers. Our Ji-young tells us more.
In South Korea, more and more dads are taking paternity leave. Data released by the Ministry of Employment and Labor on Wednesday show 3 in 10 workers on parental leave last year were men. The number of dads on paternity leave in 2022 went up by 30.5% from the previous year, amounting to almost 38,000. This accounted for about 29% of all employees on parental leave last year, an all-time high. The proportion of men taking time off to care for their children has gradually increased in recent years from the 8.5% recorded in 2016. The ministry attributed the increase to more government support, including a bigger monthly allowance. Since last year, the maximum monthly allowance went up from around 1.2 million won, or about $970 to roughly 1.5 million won, which is about $1,200. Also, since last year, parents both using their leave at the same time within 12 months of their child's birth can get 100% of their pay for the first 3 months. These measures have also helped raise the number of men and women taking leave to a record high. Last year, it rose to more than 130,000. This is up about 20,000 or nearly 20% from 2021. The number of workers taking parental leave has also gradually risen in recent years, except in 2021 when many people worked from home due to COVID-19. But with the end of social distancing and the return to normal life, more working couples with children decided to take leave last year. Ji-young, Arirang News.
For a look at the news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Dami.
All right. Let's start with news from the tech space as a global outage of Microsoft services has affected tens of thousands of users.
Well, that's right, Dami. Users of Microsoft's Outlook, Teams, Xbox Live and cloud computing platform Azure were left in the dark after the tech giant suffered a worldwide network outage. Now, Wednesday's interruption of service was due to connectivity issues with the Microsoft Wide Area Network. This groups the company's various functionalities into a single interface. Now, according to Azure, services to Microsoft have since been restored. Meanwhile, Microsoft explained that the problem resulted from a change made to its wide area network, which the company has since rolled back. It says that its services are now stable. Meanwhile, in Russia, the country's oldest human rights group has been ordered to close. The 47-year-old Moscow-Helsinki group gave annual reports on the human rights situation in Russia. But a lawsuit filed by Russia's Justice Ministry in December concluded on Wednesday that the group did not have the correct registration to operate outside of Moscow. This comes amid a series of closures of other rights and opposition groups in Russia that are critical of the Kremlin. Moscow-Helsinki group has been forced to close in the past. Its operations came to a halt in the 1970s when the Soviet government at the time jailed and exiled many of its members. Moving on to Ukraine now, where the southern port city of Odesa has had its historic center designated as a World Heritage Site in danger. The designation means that the port city will be able to use international aid to protect and rehabilitate its center. The listing was made on Wednesday after UNESCO first added Odesa to its original World Heritage list for its influence on cinema, literature and the arts. The UN body designates places that are of value to humanity and need to be protected. UNESCO members are not allowed to inflict damage to their own heritage sites or those of other members. Odesa's listing was supported by Ukraine but opposed by Russia. UNESCO also added locations in Lebanon and Yemen. And finally, New York City on Wednesday local time officially opened a new mass transit line. Called the Long Island Railroad, or LIRR, it is running a limited service for now that takes passengers on a 20-minute commute between the city's Jamaica Station and the newly built Grand Central Madison, which is on the west side of the historic Grand Central Terminal. Now, the new line cuts travel time for commuters from Long Island by 40 minutes and is predicted to reduce crowding at other major stations. The project came at a cost of $11.1 billion, 3 times over its original budget. It is also more than 10 years behind schedule.
Good morning. From yesterday's unbearable freezing start to today's snowy morning. Snow is pounding down mainly in western regions right now before moving down south. And for now, a heavy snow advisory has been issued for west of the capital region with more than 10 centimeters of snow in the forecast, as well for the west coast and mountainous regions on Jeju Island. Snow should let up in the capital in the afternoon, then Chungcheongnam-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces will see heavy snow from tonight. Making matters worse, it's another freezing start to the day in most parts of the country. Cold wave alerts have been lifted or downgraded, but that does not mean we can escape from the severe cold snap, so please be extra careful out there. Many will agree that this winter season has been quite extreme, well, not only for us in Korea, but likewise for our neighboring countries. Daily highs will go above the freezing mark for most parts of the country, 3 to 8 degrees higher this afternoon. Seoul tops out at 0 degrees, Daegu at 4 degrees Celsius. Then, another round of biting cold air moves into the country tomorrow. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time. Stay safe wherever you are. Thanks for watching.